This week's episode of Podular Podcast is brought to you in part by Expert Sleepers. The ES9 is a 16-in, 16-out USB audio interface with DC-coupled inputs and outputs that can be used for both audio and CV. It's the perfect one-stop solution for integrating a modular synth and a laptop or tablet, either in the studio or out and playing a gig. It has become absolutely vital in my studio, and it's made multi-tracking modular so easy, and I've been having so much more fun mixing my modular tracks because now I can have up to 16 separate inputs to mix. So if you're looking for a way to get your modular system talking to your DAW and things like VCV rack, the ES9 is the absolute no-brainer choice. So once again, thank you to Expert Sleepers for their support. I also wanted to mention that I released a new album last Friday, Modular Musings Volume 4, and I think it is hands down the best of the Modular Musings series. And it is available on Bandcamp and all the other streaming platforms, and I'd appreciate it if you gave it a listen. Link in the show description. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Podular Modcast. My name's Tim Held. This week we have Michael Bierylo on the show. Michael's list of credentials is way too long to list here in this intro, so you're going to find out all about his amazing story here in a moment. We're going to keep this intro relatively short this week because I'm running a little behind. So why don't we just get straight into this week's featured artist, who is Grand Mal, with their track, A Fine Shroud. If you would like to be a featured artist on PodMod and have me edit together a little video for it, then send an email to podmodsub@gmail.com. All right, let's check it out. All right. Thank you to Grand Mall, this week's featured artist. Again, if you would like to be a featured artist, send a track, wave file, please, over to podmodsub@gmail.com. I'd like to take a moment to thank everybody who supports Podmod on Patreon. If you would like to help keep the LEDs blinking over here at Podmod, head over to patreon.com/PodularModcast. And all right, with that, let's get into our show. I apologize for my sniffles. My seasonal allergies are starting
Oh,
to
no,
kick
no,
in.
no apologies necessary. I totally get that. It's an interesting day here. We woke up without heat, and so
Oh
I'm in the
no.
midst of getting our boiler repaired as we speak.
Oh
So,
boy. Okay. I love the color scheme you got going on in the background
oh,
there.
yeah, great. This is my studio. So
Nice.
I just rehabbed it, and I like it I like my workspace to be a bit colorful and but not crazy. So the sound absorption material is kind of a maroon burgundy, and so
Yeah.
it's a fun place to be in. So
It's funny. I've been working on totally revamping my studio here, and I just got a bunch of
oh yeah,
soundproofing stuff as well, but it's not as decorative. And I do want to paint, but I would have to take all of this stuff out, and I just don't know where I would put it while I was painting.
yeah. I had the fortune a couple of years ago in where we're living. I was able to take one room and repurpose it. So I
Hmm.
sanded the floors. I had the room rewired, so there's a whole separate circuit
Oh,
for
cool.
audio
That's
and a
great.
separate circuit for lighting or anything else.
Oh,
Um,
that's awesome.
and so that's been a huge help. And then had an acoustician come in and do some design things, and then install baffles and stuff. So
Nice. Well,
for the first time in my life, I actually have a room that's somewhat like a studio. So it's
that is
been
so
pretty,
cool. Yeah, this is me too. Before me and my wife bought this house about 2 years ago, we were in an apartment in Seattle, and this my studio was basically in our dining room /
right.
living room. So she's pretty excited that I'm locked away. And speaking of, um, I teach at a an electrical apprenticeship,
Uh-huh.
uh, and for low voltage electricians. And one of the classes, my favorite class, is called sound distribution. So I
Okay.
get to just kind of like give them, a very, very, short intro to what
Mhm.
sound is and effects. And I brought one of the
Yeah.
SPLs home because my wife goes to bed earlier than me, and our TV just echoes through our staircase and all these hard surfaces. So I'm gonna try to use this and some soundproofing to
Yeah.
reduce that a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. It's yeah, in my system, I have a Genelec system, so I have they have the software that and gives you a room analysis and calibrates the speakers,
Oh,
and I just
nice.
got a sub installed, so it really is a pretty good system. But I will say that the house, it's an old house, so it's not designed to isolate the inhabitants
Right.
uh, from the studio, their presence. So it's okay.
Yeah. Wait, okay, so you're on the East Coast. So when you say old house, that has a different meaning than out here on the West Coast. What year was your house built?
1868.
Wow, I thought mine was old. I got 1911 though, so that's pretty old for
Okay.
out here.
Yeah. No,
Um,
that's an old house.
yeah, but we love it. We just got a new roof and painted it, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's been exciting. But here we are, 4 minutes into the episode, and I haven't even introduced you.
Okay, cool.
Um, so yeah, Michael, how do you pronounce your last name? I don't want to butcher it.
So my last name is pronounced Bierylo, and I don't even pronounce it correctly because it's a Polish name, and I don't
Okay.
speak Polish. So hence I've used as kind of my stage name. I use embee, and I use
Okay.
that with professionally with people I know. When I was at Berklee, everybody called me embee.
Okay.
Students, faculty, most people, so that seems to work.
Okay, cool. And yeah, so there's so many different directions to go here. You were introduced to me by Tony Rolando,
Mhm.
and if Tony says, "Hey, you should talk to this person," then my ears perk up. So I'm excited that
Cool.
we found the time. And I think well, I don't know, because how often are you still involved with Berklee?
So I actually, so I was there for 28 years, and I left. I retired at the end of August last year. I was the chair of the electronic production and design department. So I was the chair for what, about 12 years or so,
Okay.
11, 12 years. So I kind of had a lot to do with the way the department currently is, kind of
Okay.
rethinking it and hiring lots of new faculty and stuff. I'm still active with Berklee Online. So I actually, right now, one of my projects is I teach a course in sound synthesis. It's kind of a core course for the online school, and I'm doing some revisions. So I'm kind of involved in course development and course teaching for
Very
Berklee Online
cool.
still.
So we probably have a mutual friend in Alfred Darlington.
Oh yeah, yeah, Daedalus. Daedalus is
Yeah.
awesome. I
Yeah,
was
they're good bud. We actually became friends because of the show.
yeah.
And they ended up staying with us when they came out for Velocity.
Oh wow,
And
cool.
yeah, so we chat every so often. Just a wonderful person.
Yeah, he is, and I will say to have him as a colleague to work with is really great. Just that comes through the fact that he's just a great person, but super knowledgeable and super passionate about
Hmm.
everything that he does, and actually education. He's really passionate about working with students and helping them develop. So he was a great person to bring on. Really
Yeah, for
fortunate to
sure.
have him.
Yeah, it's
Them,
really
sorry.
cool. Yeah, no, it's really cool because like I've known who Daedalus, is before I really got into this stuff, and just to flash forward to be not only friends, but it's so, I don't know if humbling's the right word. I feel like that's not a humble enough word, but they'll text me every once in a while, hey, you got a second to chat, and then they'll just pick
Uh-huh.
my brain about modules, and I'm
Uh-huh.
just
Oh,
thinking to
good.
myself, like, I know I do a show about this, but there's no way that I can tell you anything that you don't already know. But it's a
Well,
good excuse to chat and stuff. So
yeah, I'm sure that a lot of little bits of information just come through your orbit. And so,
yeah,
having somebody who's kind of an aggregator like that is really helpful. Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's a great term for it. Yeah, I don't see myself as a real expert in much of anything, but yeah, I think an aggregator, that's pretty good. Um, well, I kind of like, I want to go in a direction that interests you with our conversation. So I don't want to belabor the teaching thing so too
Mhm.
much, but I have been, an educator in some capacity for, the last 15 years, maybe more, starting out even in community college. I was TA all through community college. And then by the time I went to grad school, um, I had an assistantship. So I taught
Right.
discussion courses for a couple of years. And now I've been teaching at this apprenticeship for 5 years. And to be honest, like the pie in the sky dream is, even though I've never really taught anything officially in the world of music or production, that's really what I know best by this point. And so yeah, I'm always trying to like pick up nuggets of wisdom. But can you just kind of give your favorite version of your time at Berklee, and
Yeah,
what you did and what that entailed?
so one of the things that's really unique about Berklee and our department, most music technology programs in the world kind of are based on recording. Oh, I'm going to learn about music technology. I'm going to take all these recording courses. I'm going to learn about microphones. I'm going to learn about mixing. I'm going to use, audio fundamentals. Oh, and we'll have a course in synthesizers. But our program really is based in sound synthesis. So it started in the 1980s, I think 80, 84. Uh, Someplace, very soon after MIDI came
Mm-hmm.
out, and it was originally called the Music Synthesis Department. And it was really the first college program anywhere in the world where you could get a degree. You could major in music synthesis, and you could study how to work with a synthesizer. And so what happened over the years, as new technologies emerged, they kind of came into our area. So, when digital audio came out in 1990, 91, there were sound tool systems. Then there were Pro Tool systems. And so, with every wave of technology, it's kind of landed on our shores at Berklee. And so right now, I mean, the thing that we're doing a lot, there's a coding minor, creative coding minor. A lot of what we do um, involves coding, doing stuff with VR, doing stuff with XR, doing stuff with games, doing stuff with, you know, um, virtual reality, just all these types of new emerging things. And yes, we are doing work with machine learning and artificial intelligence. So all this kind of evolved from this, and really at the core is really every student starts out learning about synthesis.
Great.
And so one of the things I did when I came on, there's a lot of ways that you can teach um, about synthesizers. And so a colleague of mine, a guy named Tom Ray, had the bright idea that to really teach somebody about a synthesizer, you would use a modular system. Because
Hmm.
essentially what you would teach them is what are the modules in any synthesizer, how do they work, and how do signals flow between them. So the foundation, the principle behind all that is embodied in a course we offer called Modular Functions and Signal Flow.
Hmm.
So everybody in the program starts in a room with a Eurorack system in front of them. And then also on their computer, they'll have Macs and they'll use BEEP, which is actually an acronym for Berklee Electroacoustic Pedagogy. And that set of extensions to Macs was developed by Matthew Davidson, a guy. One of his names that he's known for out in the world is Strata. At the time, he worked for cycling, and then he was teaching at Berklee, and so he developed this system that eventually became part of Macs.
Okay,
So
cool.
really, I mean, the work that I've done at Berklee really kind of is all based on that kind of foundation, which we found is a really powerful way, a different way to get students involved in technology as opposed to
Yeah,
throwing them in a studio. We have
I
studios.
think that's
We have
brilliant.
great
Yeah, right.
studios. We have Atmos mixing. We have all that, but it all starts with sound synthesis.
Well, I feel like that's pretty bright, because something I've noticed, I've been in bands since I was in high school, so I've always had PAs, and I'm just kind of like a magpie my whole
Mhm.
life. It's in my DNA. My whole family's like that. Not with music, but um, and I've always kind of just fumbled my way through signal flow and then getting into pedals, like understanding, like what goes before what and everything. But it wasn't until I got into modular, 7 years ago, and I'm
Mhm.
40. So I was already in my 30s by the time I got into this. And now it seems like after it took about maybe 3 or 4 years until something just clicked with me that if I have a desktop synthesizer in front of me, I can just dive right into it so much quicker. And
Right.
even, like more complicated mixers and just signal routing within a DAW, all of that has been like, I feel like just having the modular experience has
Mhm.
has fully like made me understand this, and now I can just kind of figure just about any type of music technology out. I'm not saying like I can master anything, it's just, but I can get it to do the thing it's supposed to do,
Right.
relatively quickly, when before I'd have to fumble with it until I absolutely had to go to the manual, you know.
Yeah, there's some, really basic foundational things that cut across. I mean, if you understand the idea of range and resolution, understanding if a signal is bipolar or unipolar,
Hmm.
all that stuff really kind of plays into a deeper understanding of how all this stuff works.
Hmm.
Um, it's interesting. You work with students, and when you sit down and look at a synthesizer and you try and say, okay, how does this thing work? Oh, I'm pressing this key that turns on the oscillator.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Does it?
oscillator's always on, so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
really was something that when you sit down with a synthesizer, is not self-evident.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one that you come up with is, okay, so you go from your oscillator, you go to your filter and your signal path, audio signal path, then you go into your envelope generator.
Always into the envelope. Yeah,
And but
I've talked about this with so many people.
yeah, but you never see a VCA. So you buy, a $2,000 synthesizer from whoever, and you never see, there's my VCA, because it doesn't
Right.
really, there's no controls. It's just a multiplier.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So, so there you have it.
Well, it's pretty
So,
funny. This
a lot
Pro
of the stuff.
One, yeah, like the One. This is a friend's that has just been at my house for a while, but uh, yeah, it's just there's a mode. I think it might be called the drone mode, which because
Mhm,
it's just like you can just have your oscillator on all the time.
mhm.
And he thought it was broken and didn't know for like a year until he just clicked that button. He's like, oh. That makes sense. But, had he had modular experience before that, he would have instantly been like, how do I turn this VCA on? That's funny.
No, it's so that's I think it's a useful thing, and I came to all this as a guitar player. I
Same
still
here.
am a guitar player, and
I'm going to
you
put a
know
pin in that because I want to show you some stuff.
having having that in my DNA. I've always been pretty adventurous with processing and things at
Hmm.
different times in my career, but so yeah, so that's always been there. It's just exploring sound.
Yeah. I'm curious because I actually want to jump into like before Berklee, kind of like your journey, into becoming an
Mhm.
artist. But before we switch, you were mentioning Max and cycling and stuff. Did you ever work with or cross paths with Darwin Gross?
I had met him a couple times. I knew who he was, and I was a fan of his writings. And I remember that when I got my K2000 in the '90s, he was like the only person on like listservs who really
Hmm.
actually knew the thing deep. It was him and Daniel Fisher.
Yeah.
But he actually, really knew that deep, and I always admired his work, mainly because of the depth of his knowledge, and he would just figure something out, but also figure out how to explain it in an accurate, understandable way.
I wonder
So
how
yeah,
much
he
of
was
that, like his ability to convey these really complicated ideas in a
yeah.
digestible way. I wonder this is the first time I've thought of this, but how much of that is just simply because he's was from the Midwest? Because I loved hearing him talk about this stuff because it's just coming from a voice that you wouldn't expect. That kind of
Mhm.
regional accent and like just a real friendly like I would like to have like audiobooks read by Darwin. It's
Yeah,
just a pleasant tone
yeah.
to hear.
Yeah, no, it was just, he was just this big friendly guy, and
Hmm.
there was always this kinda aw shucks thing to it, which was really kinda cool,
Yeah. And his
so
podcast was so great.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a great, you know yeah, his podcast recordings, all those stuff is really it's always really insightful,
Hmm.
what he had come up with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great loss,
Yeah,
totally great loss.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just so glad that he has such a huge, body of these conversations, this body of work with this podcast that we can kind of visit him every once in a while. I was lucky
Right.
enough to have him on. Um, and that was like a big like, oh my gosh, I'm hanging with, I'm gonna go I'm gonna go shoot hoops with LeBron or Michael Jordan or something.
Right.
Like I'm not
Yeah,
ready.
no, it's like
All right,
it's
before we switch, I just have to show you this because I did it
okay.
last night. So my uncle has this. He had this guitar. He lives with my parents.
Uh-huh.
This is an
Ooh.
I don't know what year it is, but it isn't. It's not a reissue. This is one of the original Epiphone
Yep.
Wilshires, and it was just dirty and
Uh-huh.
3 strings on it that, the strings start to feel rusty and gross. And he's like, yeah, it doesn't work. And one of, there was nuts missing off of the pots. And well, this week, one of my classes that I'm teaching is soldering. So I was like,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to just bring that into class. And while my students are soldering, I'm just going to take a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was real easy. Just the last pot, the cap had busted off, and one of the leads. Just soldered those 2 things back on. Gave it a good clean. Restrung it last night. I was expecting to have to set it up, but intonation, and now I don't want to give it back.
Yeah, I have a thing that I did for a while. It's something I call found guitar. And
Mm-hmm.
so whenever you find a guitar, it's like a piece of junk that somebody has thrown out, to pick it up, don't do anything with it, take it as it is, and see what you can do musically from it. And so in the basement is my wife's classical guitar when she was, like, 14 years old. It's got 2 strings on it, and I can go down there, and I can with those 2 strings, I can have a musical, you know, experience, performance, and, it's a really useful reminder that as an artist, it's really incumbent upon you to make the most of whatever you have, as opposed to, "Oh god, I don't have a Les Paul, so I can't be a good guitarist."
Absolutely agree with that.
So, it's always I've liked those kinds of things that were, like that were humbling.
Well,
Um,
well, I don't mean to take you around my studio and show you all my wares, but it might not be up here. But on this topic, because I have acoustic guitars and stuff, but most of what I do is all, requires electricity. And I just have this people imagine what they would do in the apocalypse, the end of the world and
right.
everything. And it seems like my biggest concern is like, well, okay, well, if I don't have electricity, what am I going to make music on? And of course, there's all sorts of great things to make music on. And my dad has this barn full of, my dad has, again, the magpie thing. But I was like, I'm going to get a saw. So I got a 26-inch Stanley saw and a bow. And that's been pretty fun. I mean, I know it's
Uh-huh.
kind of like a hipster jug band thing, but I feel like that could also be processed by modular and be,
Yeah.
because every time you play it, people always say, it sounds like that thing with the antenna. Oh, yeah, theremin. And it kind of does sound like a theremin.
Yeah, it's interesting, because people ask me, "Do you ever use your guitar with your modular?" And, I said, "No, I don't have my guitar anywhere near my modular. I don't I it's in my mind, is these are 2 different worlds on
Hmm.
purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
I want the guitar to be a guitar, and I want to kind of blow it up in a way with pedals, and, for a while I think the next time I go out and actually do performances on guitar, I'll probably once again go back to using Ableton Live, because I
Yeah.
would just run my guitar into Ableton Live with amp modeling and get all sorts of crazy plugins going, granular processing. I just
Hmm.
loved all that. I
Yeah.
suppose I could do that with the modular, but I
It's
think whenever I
wily.
sit yeah, whenever I sit down with the modular, my brain goes into another area, um,
Hmm.
and my brain wouldn't go into that area with a guitar in my hand.
I
So
understand. Yeah, I totally see that. In fact, I was the same way. I would, for the first probably 3 years of getting into modular, I barely played guitar.
mhm,
And my guitar has been at my hip, since I was 12. It's like a comfort blanket. Um, and kind of for similar reasons as you were just mentioning. And I would say over the last, it's probably been like 3 years now. And I think I'm just starting to get the hang of it. I've been on a real mission to how can I incorporate what I love about guitar and drums. I've
mhm.
got a little octopad and V drum Frankenstein off to the left here. Um, and so I basically have turned my a lot of my synth into just a glorified processor thanks to a
Mhm.
couple really cool modules that are designed to bring line level
Right.
instruments in and create envelopes and gates off of it. But I do see the total. I would never begrudge anyone who takes your stance on it, because I think I
Yeah, it's
see
funny.
how
It's
that.
the same thing with like a guitar synthesizer.
Yeah.
And so I did, at one point I had a Roland system. I never really liked it. I never really used it as, a guitar synth. Um, what I used it for is in some cases when I wanted to write commercial music, I would just, um, roll the sequencer and locked with SMPTE if you remember when we had SMPTE,
Yeah. I
and I
mean,
would
I
just
don't.
improvise on the
I
guitar.
know what it is, but yeah, yeah.
I would just improvise with the guitar and come up with ideas. So I did that. The other thing I did, I would do live performances on the guitar where I would use actually the MIDI note output from the guitar. I bring it into Max, and I would set up a pitch set based on what I was playing. So I was
Oh,
never
cool.
really using the guitar to trigger a sound, but let's say if I'm playing in the key of C, I'd have a pitch set, that was made up of notes that had no sharps or flats, and I'd have, an electronic instrument output synth sounds, not really any organized chords, just pads, things like that. And then if I all of a sudden wanted to go to A flat, it would follow me, and the pitches would go in the pitch pool, and then the sounds that would come out would be an A flat.
Oh,
And
cool.
so there's a little bit of artful dodging, getting from one key to the next. So typically, if I was doing that, I would end the section in C playing a lot of Gs. So there's a common tone between the two.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, so those are, with technology and the guitar, those are the kinds of things that have always interested me.
Yeah.
Um, but with the modular, it's for me, it's a way of thinking about music in different ways. And I don't use a keyboard controller. I basically, use sequencers and different, ways of processing voltages to get sound ideas coming out. Um, and that for me has been really, really, really useful because I get
Mhm.
musical ideas I never play on a guitar. And so,
Yeah. Yeah, that is so. I also, going back to the getting into modular and having it just kind of solidify just the signal flow and just understanding what all these terms mean, and um, I feel like even though I set my guitar down for 3 years, so to
mhm,
speak, when I came back to it, I was not mechanically better at it. I had to get my muscle memory back in
right.
shape, but I just felt like I was writing different. And that was another reason I didn't want to bring the guitar or a keyboard instrument into modular. And in fact, I didn't even have like a dedicated sequencer that I worked with until
Mhm,
within the last year. I was mostly,
right.
if I wanted sequencing, I would do, just random, Turing machine kind of stuff.
Mhm,
Because that also like just, I felt like it took me out of it. That felt like more like doing desk work than making music.
right.
Um, and I think that was, I'm still going back and forth on whether or not that was a mistake, because now that I have a sequencer I really like, I'm just like, what the hell was I doing without one of these this whole time? But I think
What is it
without it,
that
it
you
really.
settled on?
I have the Catalyst sequencer from 4MS.
Okay.
They just released it,
Mhm.
and that is just it's all right there. It's just it really works with my brain for some reason.
Cool. Yeah, I saw that, and I have a lot of 4MS stuff. I really like their designs, um, and I haven't really checked that out yet. But I've used, performance. I've used Renee,
Hmm.
and I got my first Renee in like 2010. I've used that, forever. And then just about a month and a half, 2 months ago, I'm rethinking my performance system now. I got Renee 2,
Hmm.
which is kind of a it doesn't do some of the things that I've relied on it to do,
Mhm.
but it does all sorts of other stuff. So it's
Yeah.
been really cool, kind of really visiting that new approach to the sequencing.
Mhm.
And then I use a what the Wogglebug. So I use the Wogglebug
Yeah, Wogglebug's great. I love that
to,
module.
do generate just random voltages, and then I run that through an attenuator so I can get different ranges of pitches, and so I can come up with some interesting musical ideas,
Mhm.
running it through maths so I can have just a little bit pass through and have some minor fluctuations in pitch,
Yeah.
and quantize that. So that's been really pretty cool. I've
Yeah.
really worked with that successfully.
Yeah,
So
I've always been curious about Renee. I've never really properly used one. I'm in a I'm in a an odd but privileged but limited situation having this show. I work with companies to help demo and promote their stuff, and modular is pretty expensive, and I don't make a whole lot of money, and so
right.
I don't buy a whole lot of modules. Um, it's also kind of a deal I have with my wife. She's like, you get sent stuff all the time, so you're not spending money on this, and I'm like, that's kind of a good point. Um, but so I feel really lucky to have I've linked up with 4MS. It's been a couple of years now, and I just feel really lucky that it's actually worked out with a couple companies, but 4MS being one of the longer
Mhm.
term ones where I'm so lucky that I really vibe with their stuff because
Yeah,
it's like of course I use it because it's sent to me, but it's like the stuff that stays. Even
yeah.
long after I'm done talking about it, it's and speaking of 4MS, I was listening to your live sets on your website last night, and the one from I forgot the name of the college, but I was racking my brain trying to remember the name of the module that I'm still pretty certain you were using at the beginning. Is it the spectral multiband resonator? Did you have that
No, no,
before, or was
that's in my studio rack, but I have, 2 things I use quite extensively is, 1, their ensemble oscillator,
mm,
and then 2, the spherical wavetable navigator.
that? Yeah, I was like, it
Those are
could be that too, though. Or
Yeah, those 2 are really foundational, and, the thing I like about 4MS and their designs is there's some things that they make that just are great utility.
hmm
They do something that you need to do really
hmm
well. So my whole system is
absolutely,
clocked off of, their little box.
yeah,
So that's the clock. I have one of their recent stereo kind of envelope. So a lot of the
yeah,
stuff, but the spherical wavetable navigator, every time I just go into a mode of either producing or, preparing for shows, I just go and relearn it, and I learn
yeah.
something new every time.
Yeah. In fact, that's
So
one of the reasons I wanted to bring the saw, and I've yet to try it, but I want to put the saw into the waveform in and just mess with that. And not to nerd out too much, because yes, they're a sponsor, but I would be having this conversation even if they weren't. The Swan and the Catalyst sequencer are really fun because of the phase sequencing you can do, and
uh-huh.
the LFO outs on the Swan. You put one of those LFO outs into like a switch so it's not constantly firing,
Mhm.
but you can just have this normal, kind of clocked sequence running. And then all of a sudden, when that LFO hits, it just kind of moves that all around in, whatever direction
Right.
you want, depending on the LFO. And you can get some really, really fun and wild results with that.
Yeah, I have, so I run a lot of stuff off of maths,
Mm-hmm.
so the cool thing that I'm using is a, make noise shared system case,
Mm-hmm.
CV
I love that
bus.
case. Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think, I just get uh, 2 continuous, you know, changing things, and I can move that wherever I want. If I want
Yeah.
that to, you know, do the wavetables in here if I wanted to do that. But whenever I need some sort of shifting kind of change, I just have it. I just plug it in really easily. So that's
Um,
been really useful.
I'm
And that's the
getting
hard thing about modular is one of the things when I talk about performance and performance strategies is the real challenge is to come up with something where the sound is always changing.
yeah, yeah.
And that's the thing that people ultimately kind of connect with. They hear something, "Oh, I hear that. That's familiar. Oh, it's changed ever so slightly." So whether
Uh-huh.
it's morphing through a wavetable that has a lot of, related waveforms, or it's, doing subtle changes in timbre somehow, um, that's really important. That to me is
Mhm.
really, key to kind of keeping things going.
Can you am I still here or have I frozen for you
No,
or
you're
okay,
totally great.
cool. All
Everything
right,
is
because I just got like this notification to like, hey, you got to clear some cookies. This happens sometimes, or clear your
oh, okay.
browsing data, and this happens, and sometimes it screws it up. But I just deleted some, so I think we might be in good shape. But we may have to stop and start again if it happens again. Sorry about that. Oh, and
Yeah,
I'm gonna
no,
get a sneeze.
everything on this end is totally smooth.
Okay, cool. Well, here we are, 35 minutes in now, and I haven't done the get to know your history part. We just started nerding out, which I love to do. But I'm curious, like, where did you grow up, and how did when did you know, and how did you find out that you were not just an appreciator of music, but wanted to be a
Yeah.
participant?
I grew up in Detroit, and
Oh, cool.
actually the city of Detroit,
Oh,
city
wow. Okay.
proper.
I went to grad school in Kalamazoo.
Yeah, so people say, "Oh, I'm from Detroit," but, they're actually from Royal
Right.
Oak or
Yeah.
Ferndale
Yeah.
or something. But, the movie 8 Mile, I'm from 7 Mile. So I'm
Oh, okay. Okay.
in the city I grew up. Um, and so as a kid, I wanted to be a scientist. I really, entered science fairs, and my thing is I was gonna be Mr. Wizard. That was it. And then I kinda came across, like, Jimi Hendrix, and that
Okay.
just kind of blew the doors off of stuff, and I forgot about Mr. Wizard. Um, but over the years, I mean, what I've found is those 2 things are now coming together. I can have, the Mr. Wizard be part of my artistic practice, and I can have, this wild, over the top kind of sound, excursion, be part of it too. So it's kind of like, I'm thinking of Mr. Wizard, I'm thinking of Band of Gypsies. That's kind of like my DNA. Um, but I, had a pretty, normal childhood growing up. I played in bands in high school. I went to college. I went to University of Michigan for a couple of years. I thought I was going to be a film major, but I was really more interested in the music, and so I came out east. I went to Berklee, got my degree, and then just stayed in Boston and played in bands. Started doing production work, started doing commercial work. So, at a certain point, is whatever I could do that would keep me out getting a day job. Um,
That's
so
everything you're saying. I'm like check check like it's very similar. We have very similar. Like I feel like
yeah,
I'm on just like an alternate universe version of your path here.
yeah, and, there's a lot of it, and I think once you get to the point that you say, "I'm not going to get a day job. I'm going to figure this out." That's the point that you know that this is what you got to do.
Hmm.
And so,
Hmm.
even though I refer to my time as at Berkeley as my day job, and it really was, especially when I became an administrator, a day job.
Yeah.
Um, I was always involved with the art form. I was always involved with music, with musicians. I was in a community of very highly talented, highly creative people. So, that was nourishing.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, so and then about, let's say, 95, I started at Berkeley. And then at that point, I was touring a lot. I played in this band called Birdsong of the Mesozoic. And so we toured the US a fair amount in the 90s. Then I was doing, soundtracks and production work in my studio in Boston, and it just got to be a pretty crazy lifestyle. We had a child, and I thought, well, maybe, having a academic career might give me some more time at home. So I kind of pursued that while still keeping those other things kind of going. But, over the course of the years, the Berklee thing, the teaching thing got bigger, and the other pieces kind of got a little bit smaller. So it's all
Yeah.
still there. But I kind of figure that, there's times in your life to do certain things, um, and to not sweat what you're doing at a particular time. That will change. You can change it. So now I have a fair amount of time to do creative work that I didn't have like a year ago,
Hmm.
which has been great.
That's
Uh,
awesome. Well, that's a perfect segue because I wanted to make sure, because we're, the last 20 minutes here. Um, I wanted to make sure to touch on like what are you excited, like what do you want to talk about, like, or what are you excited about, what are you working on? It doesn't have to necessarily be like a promotional thing. Like,
yeah.
I just want whatever. I want to just hear like what's got your
Well, I
creative
think
juices flowing.
yeah, I think one of the things that's been interesting. So last year, when I left my day job, my wife and I got in the car and spent 2 months driving across the country.
Oh my god.
And during that time, I did a few shows. So the people in Portland, especially Tim, um, at 4MS was super useful. I did a quad concert in Portland. I didn't make it
Nice.
up to Seattle. I have some friends in Seattle who were really complaining about that. But we got to see, some of my friends on the West Coast. Got to hang out with Suzanne Ciani,
Oh,
with
nice.
Robert Rich. These are people I
Yeah.
all knew from their time at being visiting artists at Berklee.
Yeah.
So doing shows and hanging out, just thinking about stuff, and that was great. Um, and then when I got back, I had to do a soundtrack with a friend of mine, Roger Miller from Mission to Burma.
Oh, cool.
And then
Wow.
I had to mix two records that were being re-released on vinyl of my stuff from years guitar records. And so I think, what I'm doing now is I'm, creating original electronic music, which I really haven't done a whole
Hmm.
lot of lately. And so what's been interesting is I thought, okay, the place I'm going to start is I'll take what I do in my live performances and I'll use that as a point for creating compositions. So I've been doing a lot of that and then fine tuning things. And what I'm finding is that things that really I thought were compelling in live performance, when I actually produce them, don't always make for a great listening experience.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so the thing I'm really doing now is how do I create things that are really, good compositions that will represent who I am, but will also serve as kind of a calling card for doing gigs. Uh,
Nice.
so I'm more
Again,
of a
like our heads are
performer than
occupying.
a producer, actually.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but that's been an interesting part of the journey, and I have a touring system, a system I perform with, and I have another system that's a studio system,
Hmm.
and then I have what I call the annex, which is my son's studio, and my son is a producer. So
The annex. I love it.
all the stuff that I had in the '90s from that are in the basement, are up in his studio now. Plus, my Moog stuff. He's got my Voyager. He's got my
Oh, wow.
Subharmonicon. He's got my ARP
Nice.
2600.
Oh,
So a bunch of dad's
spoiled.
stuff is in so the annex. Use it whenever I want. Um, but right now, kind of limiting myself to the system that I've developed for performance. That's kind of what I'm doing, but I'm kind of getting close to the point where I'm just going to break away from that. And I'm just going to say,
Okay.
I'm just going to think about what this particular piece needs and what I'm going to use.
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of what I've been doing is just really learning the things I have in a much deeper way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so just going back and saying, what are all the things I can do with this crazy module? So I have this. One of my favorite manufacturers is Synthesis Technology.
Mm-hmm.
So what do they call it? It's the Cloud Terrarium.
Yeah, that thing's
So
wild. Yeah,
I
it's a
use one
wavetable
piece of
oscillator. Is that right?
pardon?
Is that
Yeah,
that's a
dual
wavetable oscillator?
wavetable.
Yeah.
Uh, and so for years, I just used like one piece of that, which was essentially what I did with my morphing terrarium. So now I'm going back and say, okay, what is all the things that this thing does? And I'm like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God. So that's, a lot of what I've been doing. And so which each of these, revelations really kind of brings up new ideas for composition and performance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of the things I switched out lately, so I've always had some sort of granular processor. Um, and so I recently just got the qubit uh,
The Mojave.
Mojave, and then I use that with their physical modeling. I
Yeah.
forget the name of all these crazy things. It's the surface.
Yeah.
So
I think the Mojave um, is maybe the most. It's the quickest like granular module. It's the one
yeah,
that I can most quickly access like melodic and intentional like movements with melody with it. And I think
yeah,
that's a lot on user error, but they have made it easy for people like me. I love that module.
yeah. I've for a long time I used a module from noise engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great because whenever I needed just a cloud of something, this thing did a really beautiful job of
Mm-hmm.
it. So it was really hard to kind of sacrifice that, at least at the time being.
Mm-hmm.
But I really want to kind of go in with Mojave.
Yeah, what I've
And
really liked about that is I have yet to have until the Mojave success with using percussive stuff with
yeah,
granular modules, and that thing is just it's I have to remind myself like, hey, it does other stuff, Tim.
yeah. And I've seen you've had Andrew Eikenberry on your show,
Yeah,
and
twice. Yeah.
he's actually an alum of our program.
Oh, cool.
Um,
Yeah.
And so the first thing that came out of Qubit was the nebulae, and the
Mm-hmm.
nebulae was their senior project at Berklee.
Mm-hmm.
So they're
Great module as well.
yeah, so they made that as students, and then they built a company on it. So and I whoa
Sorry about that. Whoa.
yeah, so I love all the stuff Andrew's doing with Qubit,
Yeah,
and
same here.
then
I'm a big fan.
Jason Lim, who was originally uh, part of Qubit, is now he went to his hometown in Glasgow, and he's got his own company now on
Hmm.
some of his things. Um,
Yeah, the R bar
I'm
is a pretty fun granular processor as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. That's why I'm kind of in terms of just the technical things of modules, uh, what I'm doing, and I'm just trying to listen to new music and things like that. Um, I'm psyched. I'm going to every year I go to Berlin for CTM.
Okay.
So I was there in January, but I've never been to Super Booth. So this year I'm going to go to Super Booth.
I have
Um,
yet to go as well, and I really want to.
yeah, so I got that trip is planned. I'm really psyched. I
Nice.
used to go to NAM every year,
Hmm.
um, but NAM
That seems like a
it's not
zoo
what it
these.
used.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of really is. A lot of manufacturers have dialed back. Mainly because it's stupid expensive to be involved
Hmm.
at a trade show in
Yeah.
Anaheim, California.
And they're exhausting.
Yeah,
out of all, like, I've done a few, but I'm not a manufacturer. Like I've assisted with like after later audio and recovery effects, like
Mhm.
just to kind of like watch the booth while they're taking a break, and then because I know their product. But from my friends who are, who own companies, like it's a slog for them to
Yeah.
just be on all day and just talk synthesizers all day and kind of the same conversations repeating and stuff. And yeah, I feel for him.
Yeah, that's that happens really with any trade show, and I'm sure that's, what's gonna be
Yeah.
involved with Superbooth, but I think the community, that Superbooth builds is, a lot cooler than what you'd see
Yeah.
typically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think exactly. That's kind of, I think because of the community aspect with, and like that was the case with Velocity. And I think that happens with KnobCon and, you know, uh, what's the one in Burbank? Synth.
Perfect Circuit.
But there's like the trade show kind of like synth
Okay,
meetup.
so, min
I can't believe I'm blanking on this because KnobCon's out in Chicago, right?
right, I've been there, and the one you're thinking about is, kind of put on by Michael Boddicker.
I believe that's right. Yeah, man, I can't believe I'm blanking on it. But I have yet to go to any of them except for I've gone to a couple in small ones in Portland, and then Velocity twice here in Seattle, and that's mostly because of the prohibitive cost of
Right,
doing it all and everything. So,
right.
um,
But,
oh
Andre Schneider's a really interesting, guy. I got to know him just a little bit. Um, I had a sabbatical in 2010, and that's where I first got into modulars. I went to, Berlin, and my sabbatical topic was to, um, kind of, learn more about performing with a laptop computer. And so I had a bunch of people that I knew at Native Instruments, so we all had a beer and,
mhm.
talked to them about what I'm doing. And, I was kinda surprised. He says, "Oh, we did all that in 2000 and 2002, 2003." And I said, "Okay, so what's the cool thing now?" And their eyes lit up, and these are people who make their living designing software.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and they said, "Hardware." And so, so I got to, at that point, I spent a lot of time at Schneider's in Berlin. And then when I
Hmm.
came back, I was, okay, I'm gonna build a modular system. And then here in Boston in 2010, about the most knowledgeable individual here was, again, Matthew Davidson, Stretta. And so this is, before he was at Berklee even. So he helped me design my first system. I bought some modules from Schneider's, and I bought some from, Analog Haven, and, that's how I got into it,
That's so
uh,
cool.
in 2010, and
So
so the
yeah, oh wow.
system.
So yeah, that's a really cool time because I feel like that is close to, or if not, what a lot of people think of as the beginning of kind of like the resurgence or second
Mhm.
wave of modular. With you had back when Scott was Harvest Man and
Yep.
Make Noise and yeah, I think 4MS was maybe shortly after those, around that time. Yeah, that's so cool.
So, yeah, my first modules were, the Rene,
Hmm.
Maths, and QMMG, and the QMMG is still my performance case, and I'm asking myself, "Do I really need to take this into bars across the United States?" Um, I'm looking at what a QMMG costs on reverb, and I'm saying, "I'm taking this into a bar."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I am trying to figure out, if there is something I can use to replace that QMMG,
No, I
but
don't. I don't fully. I've never used one, but from what am I right in thinking that it's kind of like a low pass gate
yeah, it
kind of
is.
array or
Yeah, so it's a quad low pass gate, and the beautiful thing
okay.
about it, it uses real Vactrols.
Uh-huh.
And currently you cannot get
Right.
Vactrols.
Mm-hmm.
So Tip Top in their recent release, they re-released the Buchla quad
Yep.
low pass
That's what I
gauge,
was just thinking. I was like, hey, well, there's this.
and they kind of make their own Vactrols, but they're not really Vactrols. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have the pop of the originals.
Yeah.
Tony at Make Noise, I think he's designed his own circuit that emulates a Vactrol. So I'm thinking of
Mm-hmm.
getting some of his. There's a couple
Yeah, the mod
stereo.
to mix, right? It doesn't the
Yeah, well,
mod to
there's
mix.
that. Then there's a fairly new one that he came out with within
Oh,
the
right.
last 6
Yeah.
months or so.
Yeah.
And just from the videos I've seen, that seems to have a closer quality to
Mm-hmm.
what a Vactrol will do.
Yeah.
Um, but I just love this kind of cool pop, this kind of edginess that it has,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't get them anymore.
So,
So
I mean, it could have. I mean, I'm not going to say that this thing has anything close to the QMMG, but I haven't used that. But I do. I'm trying to find it, but it's a three HP module. It's a
uh
dual LPG with each has its three-way switch to get different kind of like decay time, and it's made by Takab. Have you
okay,
and it's passive. It doesn't need
uh-huh,
power.
wow,
And I absolutely love that thing. And I think I bought it for like $30 or something.
wow, okay, I'll check
So
that out.
I mean, it may not be as like as poppy and sound as good, but for its price and it doesn't eat up more power in your case. The only thing that sucks is 3 HP is cool, but it's a weird size. So when you're
Yeah,
putting stuff together, you always end up with like a little sliver or it just won't fit.
yeah, it's kinda like Harvestman. He would always have the odd number of HP, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why couldn't you have just added 2? And so it's always just an odd thing to have his modules in your rack, at least
I
the
don't
early
know
ones.
Scott well, but I've hung out with him a few times. Awesome, sweet, funny guy.
Yeah.
I could see part of him being like, and like almost doing it on purpose just to be like, just because he thought it was funny.
Yeah. No, needless to say, a very, very talented engineer and
Oh,
designer. Thank
insane!
you.
Yeah.
I have, the Stilson Hammer is one of the
Hmm.
sequencers I have, and I
I've
have
heard
early
such good things about that.
early, wavetable module from him.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so that's what I'm up to.
That is so cool. I mean, this flew by. I really appreciate chatting with you, and I'm sorry it took so long for us to get this together, but there's
Oh,
no
no
time like
worries.
the present. Um, so before we sign off here, I'll put links in the show description. But if there's anything you want to point my listeners to, as far as what you think they
Okay,
should check
cool.
out or whatever, go ahead and let them know.
Okay, great. If you want to put a link to my website, I'm, now actively updating that with, news and information. I'm working on a bunch of local performances. Um, one of the things I'm trying to do is get modular musicians paired off with more traditional acoustic improvisers,
Mm-hmm.
and build an audience for that type of performance. Because here in Boston, I mean, we have a pretty thriving electronic music scene,
Mm-hmm.
but it's pretty self-contained.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm looking to expand that audience into people who also are interested in, maybe not traditional jazz, but more modern jazz, more improvisational
Okay.
things, and
You know, I
trying to kind of build out that community, that audience a little bit more. And we did a first session about a week and a half ago in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it turned out great.
That's awesome.
Except I thought I played too much, but live and learn.
I don't know how close it is geographically, but like how far away is Baltimore from Boston?
It's about 8
Four or
hours.
five? Oh, 8 hours.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she's in Baltimore. I've had her on the show. I'm a huge fan of her stuff. Her name is Alma Laprida,
Okay.
and I think you should check because she would be a cool person to try to link up with a modular artist. What is the name of this instrument she plays? It's like a like one of the proto cellos, but it has a name that you wouldn't think is a cello. It sounds like a horn. I think even horn is in the name or
Okay.
something. But yeah, she does really, really cool, like field recording kind of mixed. I don't know. She does really interesting stuff, and I could see, I
Okay,
could see her
cool.
being, and she's really active and always trying to do, always playing shows, it seems. So,
Great. I'm gonna reach
yeah.
out because I am trying to put together, more shows up and down the East Coast.
Okay, cool.
And then
Yeah.
maybe this fall, hopefully doing, like another swing out west.
Well,
But,
yeah, if you come out here, let me know. We've got a
oh,
guest bedroom
absolutely.
here in Tacoma. It's nice and cozy. And yeah, I'd love to show you around and maybe
Awesome.
jam or something. Yeah. But
Yeah, the last time I was in Seattle, I think, I was on tour with Birdsongs, but I know a few people there, and, so I'd love to go back. Yeah.
yeah, right on. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate
Yeah,
this. I feel
I
like we could have
appreciate.
talked for another couple hours.
Yeah, I think I have to talk to my plumber now. Yeah, have an important conversation that, involves heating my house, so
All right, that's this week's show. Thank you so much to Michael for coming on. Links to everything Michael Bierylo in the show notes, as well as links to this week's featured artist, Grand Mal. Again, if you would like to be a featured artist, send a WAV file to podmodsub@gmail.com. And if you would like to support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/podularmodcast. Thank you to all of our sponsors, links to their amazing products in the show notes. And this week's featured word will be devil mask. Until next week.